My name is Aisha. I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. We're a transnational, grassroots, youth-led organization, which means we're completely volunteer-run. We operate out of small donations from individual donors. We're primarily based in the United States, but we are now expanding, and we operate in 30 cities around the world, so all across the United States, Canada, Britain, and Italy. And I really appreciate you guys making time. I actually was here meeting with different unions and different parties across Europe. So we were in Spain and Rotterdam and Italy and Denmark, and I came to see my family here. I haven't seen my family in 10 years since they left Palestine, since they left Palestine. And when we were meeting with some comrades in the ITF, they said, "You're going to Belgium? We got to connect you to Joost." And so I wasn't planning to come and speak to you all, but I'm so grateful that I did, because the work of your unions here is really impeccable. It's very amazing to have you guys actually invite us here to actually talk about this campaign. I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell a lot of stories about how this campaign came to be, and the different developments that we've had throughout it. We have 3 new research reports that are coming out in the next couple weeks. That's get a little inside scoop on that right now. And I'll go through the research a bit, but mostly I want to tell stories, because I think that that's how people are able to follow, and how people are able to remember some of the important points that I want to communicate to you today. So I'm just going to talk about, also really apologize. We tried so hard to get this to be in presentation mode, and it just is not working with us. So if you want to come up here and take pictures, or you want to ask me to send you the presentation afterwards, I'm happy to do that. But I'll try and communicate what's on the slides if you can't see for the folks in the back. But I'm going to talk about who we are as the PYM, why we decided to take up this campaign, some of the research, the strategy that we're taking. There's multiple fronts to this campaign, and then the different angles that we're taking with media and legal, etc. I think our professor gave us a grounding on the genocide in Gaza. At this point, it's not debatable what's happening in Palestine is a genocide. We know that Gaza has been completely destroyed since October 7th. Right now we're seeing the north of Gaza being completely evacuated, and we believe that Israel, or the Zionist entity, is going to occupy even the north of Gaza. And now we believe that the Netanyahu administration is planning to annex the rest of the West Bank. And so we, as the Palestinian Youth Movement, were organizing tirelessly since October 7th. We organized the largest protest in the history of the United States. We had 1 million people at the White House in DC a month after the genocide started, and we didn't hear much from our elected officials. The Democratic Party wasn't responding to us. So after that, we said, okay, we should, if they're not going to call for a ceasefire, then we are going to push ceasefire on the local level. And so we organized to our city councils and to our state legislators to get them to support a ceasefire. And we were mostly actually successful with this. The masses, whether actually you're from the Democrats or the Republicans, the United States is much more right. So when I say the left and the right here, it's probably more like your center and far right. But across the board, they were still supportive of a ceasefire. Whether that was for economic reasons, or that was for humanitarian reasons, or it was just because they were aligned with the liberation of Palestine, people wanted a ceasefire. Yet the Democratic Party wasn't responding to it. And so we continued to build pressure, and then we saw Joe Biden say, "We want a ceasefire." And we were like, amazing, something's gonna happen from this. But nothing happened. Why? Because they were still sending billions of dollars over in military aid to Israel. So you can say the word ceasefire until you're blue in the face, but if your actions don't actually uphold it, we know that you actually aren't for a ceasefire. So we were back to the drawing board. We said, okay, now we need to start pushing for an arms embargo. We know that the United States ships over 62% of the weapons in the entire world to Israel. 62% of the weapons that Israel gets is specifically from the United States. And us having many chapters in the United States, we were like, we play a really important role in this. If we actually want a ceasefire, we need to start targeting the weapons industry. So we began. We said, we could go after different weapons manufacturers. So we did a lot of research on Lockheed Martin, on Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Elbit Systems, etc. And as we were coming up with different strategies for it, we realized that it's really hard to tell a weapons company to stop making weapons or stop selling weapons. That's their job. And so we said, okay, well, if we can't go after the weapons companies themselves, if this is going to be a difficult angle, let's look at the transportation of weapons. Let's look at shipping. How are these weapons actually flowing from the United States over to the Zionist entity or to Israel? And I can tell I'll tell maybe a side story about this, but we had a military vessel that came to the port of Oakland. And this military vessel was very clearly a military ship. And community came, the Arab youth came, and we formed a picket, and the workers weren't able to cross the picket. They decided not to cross the picket, and the ship wasn't able to be loaded with military weapons. It was then diverted up to Seattle. So I live in the northern part of California. Seattle is also on the west coast. It's 2 states up. SubhanAllah, I also was born and raised in Seattle. I had just moved to Northern California, so I got on a flight. And I said, I gotta go to Seattle, we gotta do another picket over there. And we did. We had a successful picket. It was rainy, it was 12 hours long. It was from 5 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But 2,000 people showed up and we had a successful picket. And again, the workers weren't able to cross and load this military vessel. What did they end up doing? They ended up shipping in, they literally boated in military personnel to load the military ship. And we had to sit and talk with ourselves. We were like, okay, is this a success or is this not a success? Like we want to be, we're not trying to claim easy victories. But what we realized was that what we were able to do effectively was to say that your average day worker, your rank and file union member, should not be complicit in genocide. They don't want to be complicit in genocide. I personally can't stop the US military. If I could, I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. But what I can do is create a fissure. I can create a contradiction. I can create a site of struggle between the US Army and your everyday average working class union member, dock worker. And so this is kind of the idea that came to be why we decided to target a commercial logistics shipping company. So we then were at the, again, we were back on the research angle. We decided, we were like, okay, if we know that we want to target a commercial shipping company, which one are we going to target? We know that the US plays a really important role in the genocide of our people. And we also know that Europe has more progressive unions than we do. And so we were like, okay, let's look at the Department of Defense Maritime Security Program. So during Operation Desert Storm, the United States said we need to ship over so many weapons for the invasion of Iraq, and they weren't able to do it with military vessels alone. So they said that we need to create a fleet that has the capability of shipping military cargo over to whatever conflict zone they wanted. At that time, it was the Middle East. Crazy, it's still the Middle East. This fleet is comprised of, I would say, about 30 different ships, the majority of whom are from Maersk. And we said, okay, so Maersk seems like a good target. We also know that there's a history of dock worker struggle. When we look at the anti-apartheid movement with South Africa, it was the dock workers who played a really pivotal role in actually stopping the flow of goods, military equipment, etc., to apartheid South Africa. And so we said, this is a commercial company, this is a commercial shipping company that we are able to target, It's really big. It's one of the largest in the world. So relative to their actual size, their relationship to the Department of Defense and to Israel, the Zionist entity, is actually a small portion of their portfolio. It's something that we can isolate. But because they're the largest, they also set a standard for all other logistics companies. And so we said, this is a perfect target for us to bring our people, the grassroots movement, the Arab masses, and the workers together to revitalize this like internationalist ethic and actually enact a people's arms embargo, which is the other name that we've been using for our campaign, right? It's Maersk Off Maersk, but really what this is about is a people's arms embargo. If the government's not gonna do it, then we, alongside workers, are gonna force it. So we launched at the People's Conference for Palestine, which is the largest conference that we had in the past 30 years for Palestine, and it was very successful. People were very excited about it. We had unions who were really interested in supporting with our research. I haven't drank water like in this entire trip. We've been meeting with a lot of people, sorry. And so we launched, and Maersk actually publicly responded and said, we don't ship any weapons or ammunitions to conflict zones, and we care about the humanitarian crisis of the Palestinian people. We knew that that wasn't true. We were like, okay, if 60% of the weapons from the United States, are, for Israel are coming from the United States, and you guys are the largest fleet within this maritime security program, how is that true? Doesn't make sense to us. So we said we really got to get into the nitty-gritty of the research. Really difficult to find specifics on what cargo is being shipped. I think it's actually more difficult for you here in Europe than it is for us in the United States. So we met up with some partners. They're Progressive International. It's called a campaign, No Harbor for Genocide, which I'll get into a little bit about how our campaigns work with each other. But basically what we did was we started looking at all of the different weapons companies in the United States and tracking where they are, like what roads they take, what railways they take to then go to the port to go to Israel. Now in the United States, the Department of Defense has specific lines that they are able to travel on with military cargo. So this really started to narrow things down. We also knew that the bill of lading for commercial shipping companies would become available after 1 month of docking. But while the ship is in motion, you cannot see what cargo is on that ship. So then we said, okay, we need to start tracking this pattern. We saw there's this weapons company here. It's likely gonna come out of this port here. We know that there's a Maersk ship here that's under the Department of Defense Maritime Security Program. It's going to Israel. Let's look at the bill of lading. Through that, we established a pattern. Once a week, there was, and we tracked about 2,000 shipments. This is actually old research. Like I said, we have 3 more reports that are coming out, and so we found much more, but for the sake of this conversation, I'm just gonna use the research that we've been reporting on so far. There's been over 2,000 shipments of engines, hulls, specialized parts for armored personnel characters, and tactical vehicles, as well as aircraft. And so it's about 1 ship per week with approximately 1,000 tons of military cargo. And what was great about this, not great, but I mean what was great for our research, was that it was actually destined for the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So on the bill of lading, it says this is going to the Israeli Ministry of Defense. So we said, okay, that's it. We have our research. This is a visual representation of what's in some of these shipments, okay? This is really important for you guys all to see because the largest amount is actually no product description, which is very suspicious for us. We can't prove what's in that, but these ships obviously have the capability of carrying live ammunition on it. Now, if it's a dangerous good, so if it has live ammunition in the cargo, it's explosive, which means workers must be paid more And there's a lot of different environmental laws that now are enacted, and it really needs to be classified information or declassified information to the workers so they know I'm carrying something that could explode and kill me, right? So we don't know what's in that, but we do have many question marks, especially because at this point, Maersk was still denying. They were like, we are not shipping any sort of weapons or ammunitions. And we were like, well, that's crazy, because you're shipping the bullet casings, you're shipping the tanks, you're shipping the Oshkosh tactical vehicles, but you're not shipping the ammunition within it, which means that they're using the International Trade of Arms Regulation definition, which says that essentially, unless it's a live ammunition, it's not considered a weapon. So they're using this really specific nitty-gritty legal roundabout to try and make sure that they're not able to take any sort of accountability for the fact that they're profiting off of genocide, and they're profiting big off of genocide. This is some pictures of the Maersk armored personnel carrier, which is essentially a mini tank. This is the Oshkosh vehicle. If you can see, this is there's a lot of Palestinian men in the back. They've been stripped naked. They're probably taking them to be tortured or thrown in a hole or something. We know that these are specifically the trucks that are being used to remove the population from the north to the south, which is in our legal report that we have submitted to Francesca Albanese's office this morning, and so to talk about Maersk's role in the genocide. I just want to say also that this campaign was really great, because it really showed the link between the struggle for liberation for the Palestinian people and also rights of workers. Maersk has like 1,000,005 labor violations. I put a couple up here, but I'm sure for the folks here who actually work for Maersk or are in a union that's affiliated, you guys know much better. But in 2022, they were fined $10,000 for covering up sexual assault cases. There's been Maersk workers and contractors who have been killed on the job. They were sanctioned by the Labor Department in the United States for unsafe working conditions, which is really difficult to do in the United States because the standard is like the bar is in hell. And then they retaliated against a whistleblower who actually was the person to report on these working conditions. If you saw, there was this ship that crashed into the Baltimore Bridge in the United States. Turns out that ship was carrying, I think it was, 700 tons of toxic waste to Sri Lanka. And who was on that ship? It was Sri Lankans and Filipinos. They were, many of them were undocumented. And the way that these companies are able to not take accountability for all of their different labor violations is that when they're at sea, technically whoever is on the ship itself, they're considered at fault for whatever happens. So after this ship hit the Baltimore Bridge, they kept many of these Sri Lankan and Filipino workers on the ship for investigation for, I think it was 3 weeks. They were exposed to all of that toxic waste. And then this is just important for us because, again, that question mark comes up for me. There have been repeated cargo fires on Maersk ships that came from unmarked cargo. The one that happened most recently was actually coal was in unmarked cargo, and it lit on fire. And the ship was burning for, I think it was like 4 days. So we know that they have actually not done what they have said they need to do, because then you have to pay your workers more, which again, big question mark for us, but we don't know. So what does this mean? This means that now we have established a pattern. We've established a pattern of the different ships that are leaving specifically from the port of New Jersey. Of the 2,000 shipments that we tracked, it's 2,110. I think 2,106 of them came from the port of New Jersey, and then 4 or 5 of them came from the port of Houston. They all docked in Algeciras, I'm going to butcher that name, in Spain, in the port of Spain. And then they went to Israel or the Zionist entity. That's a big problem because Spain actually has enacted an arms embargo against Israel for this genocide. So we were like, okay, what's our avenue right now? We are going to be able to prove that Maersk is shipping military cargo and also violating Spain's own laws. So we sent a briefing, us alongside Progressive International, to the Spanish government, and we said this is the pattern that we've seen thus far. We suspect that more will be coming, and we think that you should care about it. And this was then put into a mainstream news outlet in the United States called The Intercept. We were working, again, we're a grassroots youth-led organization, so we were like, really, all this research and getting this connection to this big media agency, it was a lot of work for us, and we thought this was going to be a big break. We didn't expect the Spanish government to respond, and they responded that day. So we were like, oh my God, that's even bigger. The Spanish government has responded, and they responded, and they said, I think I actually might have it here. They said, we will do an investigation. No, I actually don't have it, but they said, we will do an investigation, and if your findings are correct, then we're gonna act on it. We were like, great, that sounds amazing. 2 days later, then all of a sudden we hear on international news that 2 Maersk ships that we had identified were blocked from docking at the port of Spain. Clearly, they had done their investigation and they had found our research to be accurate. And so, oh yeah, I actually have it here. So if the information is confirmed, all necessary measures will be taken. And then they deny these 2 ships, okay? So now we're like, okay, well, these ships now have a big X on them. We know that they're carrying military cargo and they can't dock in Spain. So where are they gonna go? This is just an outline. These are all the different Maersk ships that leave from the port of New Jersey or Houston, Texas. And then they go to Algeciras, Spain, and they are transferred onto these 5 ships, the Maersk Norfolk, the Nysted Maersk, the Nexo Maersk, or Mario A or Wanda A. Just to note, Mario A and Wanda A are not actually Maersk ships, but they've been chartered and they have relationships, obviously, to Maersk. And so when they go to Algeciras, Spain, they take off the cargo that's on this ship and then they transfer it onto the new ship. They were unable to do that this time because of our campaign. So we had 2 ships that were at large in the Mediterranean, trying to find they're scrambling to find a new port to dock at. And we also had 2 more ships that were headed there to pick up that cargo and then take it to Israel. So really, we had 4 ships that we were tracking at that moment. I'll tell the story of the Maersk Denver, and I can go into the Nysted a little bit, but the Maersk Denver was then forced to reroute to Morocco to drop off its military cargo in the Tangier Medport 2, which is really important because Medport 1 actually has a union. Medport 2 does not. And the workers and the broad Arab masses were obviously livid about this because the Moroccan people stand with Palestine. And so there was major protests that were organized. 10 different dock workers refused to handle any of the cargo. They were then subsequently fired for that. And one activist that actually spoke out in support of our campaign and BDS was taken to jail. He's still in jail. His family has not been allowed to speak to him, and he has not been given a lawyer yet. This is a statement from the Moroccan Front for Palestine Against Normalization, saying that they are against the Maersk ship, and their organization condemns this. it was at this point, and I can tell the story of the Nysted. The Nysted went to Egypt. Egypt, the port workers there have been having a lot of repression from their government for trying to stop any sort of military cargo that's going to Israel. And so they weren't able to organize anything. And then it actually went to Turkey. And there was also popular protests there, mobilizations, and dock workers who did not want to handle any of this. And Turkey is a very interesting case because for Morocco has normalized with Israel. Now the question is, even if an Arab country normalizes its relationships to Israel, is it going to allow the facilitation of military cargo during a genocide? This is another layer, right? But Turkey has said that they ain't shipping anything. There's no relationships to Israel right now in terms of the flow of cargo, let alone military cargo. And so we're looking into different diplomatic strategies there and ways to actually make sure that this is being upheld. So what happened? Now Spain has rejected 2 ships. Maersk is saying, oops, we were caught, right? We can argue that these grassroots organizers don't know what they're talking about, but when the Spanish government says something, it's a different story. And so they say, to gain clarity for future operations, we've consulted the Spanish authorities to understand why our entry was denied for cargo that was no different than previous shipments that have been routinely transshipped through this port without incident. So they really shot themselves in the foot because at this point they don't know that we've been tracking all these different shipments. So now we know that this is a routine for them, what was on this ship. And it says, it is our understanding that Spain has in its discretion changed its criteria and is now rejecting vessels that carry anything military related going to or from Israel, notwithstanding such cargo being legal. So then it was, okay, we're shipping things that are military related. We got an admission from them. At this point, the Nysted comes to pick up the cargo in Morocco, and it completes its delivery to Israel. Again, there's been more. This the protest, some pictures of the protest. This is the Moroccan workers who were fired because they refused to load the military cargo. And there was a lot of, in Moroccan media, there was a lot of pictures of what was actually on the ship itself. So you can find that if you Google it. Trying to think where I want to take this right now. So essentially at this point, we now are tracking these shipments that continuously are flowing out of the United States and going to Spain, or Tangier Med Port 2, and then Israel. And they've continued to follow up until now. One of the ships, actually the Nysted, it wasn't able to drop off all of its cargo, so there are still some cargo parts that are on it that are military cargo that they are going to attempt to drop off in Spain again, and so we're going to create another commotion of it. And we have many research reports that are coming out that actually do prove that they are shipping ammunitions, and they're violating every sort of international law. And so we've submitted a legal report to Francesca Albanese's office detailing their violation of international law. We also found through our research that not only are they shipping weapons, ammunition, and weapons components, but they are shipping actual cargo to the settlements in the West Bank. And not just any cargo to the settlements in the West Bank, but specifically cargo that's construction material. So the highest level of violations of BDS. So we are also now working on a research report that will be public soon. Maersk has now been listed as a BDS target by the BNC, which is the National Coordinating Committee for the BDS movement. And so we have many different angles that we are able to hit Maersk and affect their bottom line for their profiting off of genocide. So our objective is to make it costly on a reputational, financial, and legal level for Maersk to continue its transportation of military cargo to the Israeli Ministry of Defense, in order to force them to drop their contracts and stop the transportation of military cargo that enables this genocide. Our strategy is we want to pressure Maersk through multiple avenues. We want to create a diplomatic crisis around Maersk, and we want to place reputational pressure on Maersk through popularizing its role in the genocide and impacting Maersk's bottom line through mobilizations, local targeted campaigns, and a broader divestment strategy. So I'm speaking to many of you here as different union representatives, but as the PYM, we are Arab grassroots youth-led organization. We want to create a mass campaign that opens many different avenues to have our community be able to be engaged in a people's arms embargo. And so we have thought about different fronts that would be able to actually bring in our community to be able to take on like one of the strategies. So media, if you follow the Palestinian youth movement on Instagram, you'd see we have created much media around this. We also have relationships with different journalists in the United States, and we're regularly writing op-eds about this. Mobilizations, so we regularly are holding mobilizations outside of Maersk's office, at the ports, alongside workers. Labor is a front. Labor is very expansive because labor not only has the ability to actually, strike or refuse to handle military cargo, which would be like the best thing that could happen. But they also have pensions. They also have different ways of divesting from Maersk. They have different ways of actually endorsing the campaign and creating a relationship, an international relationship that is able to replicate what we saw with apartheid South Africa and refuse to allow and normalize military cargo flowing through their ports that actually go to fuel this genocide. We have a shareholder strategy. We have some connections to some people who have shares in Maersk, and we're working on that. And then the legal angle, which is the Albanese's report that we just submitted. This is some of the different media that we have created. I wonder if I'm able to play this for you guys. You guys hear that, or is that really quiet?
Maersk, one of the world's largest shipping and logistics company, is also a leading partner in Israel's genocide against Palestinians. So by targeting Maersk specifically, we are able to go directly to the supply chain for the Israeli genocide. We are building a true people's arms embargo.
It's our research report. You can find it on our website, maersk.com.
In the last year, Maersk has facilitated over 2,100 such shipments for the Israeli Ministry of Defense, totaling tens of thousands of tons of military cargo. When we published these findings, the Spanish government had to backtrack, announce that they would investigate our findings, and then they immediately prevented 2 incoming Maersk ships from docking in the port of Algeciras.
España, el gobierno de España, le sigue comprando, vendiendo y permitiendo el tránsito de armas hacia Israel.
The protests that we saw in Morocco.
These Mediterranean ports are critical nodes in the supply chain of death that is being used against Palestinians. If those Mediterranean ports were closed off to Israel, shipping and logistics companies like Maersk would have to go around the Horn of Africa and through a land bridge in order to transport these weapons and military cargo to be used in the genocide. Namer personnel carriers heavy tactical vehicles like the Oshkosh, the Israeli Ministry of Defense puts rocket launchers on these tactical vehicles that we know Maersk is shipping, and they launch missiles at Palestinian homes, schools, and refugee camps. Almost 35% of the shipments that we looked into that Maersk was delivering to the Israeli Ministry of Defense had entirely blank descriptions on their bills of lading, which is the commercial document that Maersk is required to report as a part of their facilitation of trade. This should be highly suspicious to anyone looking at this data, and we have to be asking ourselves, what is Maersk trying to hide? We will not stop doing this kind of research and exposing their ties as a merchant of death and the genocide until they cut all of their connections, facilitating the arms trade with Israel.
So, as you can see, we've been trying to develop different angles of this campaign. And it was really an honor when the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, or the PGFTU, which is the largest federation trade union conglomeration in Palestine, so both the representative from the West Bank and Gaza, released a statement calling on dock workers and ports across the world. Just so you all know, the PGFTU is a member of the ITF, so for ITF folks in here, and they called on dock workers around the world to stop handling military cargo destined for Israel. And they specifically said not just military cargo on military vessels, but other shipping and logistics companies like Maersk and Zim. And so they named Maersk because obviously they can see that this is a company that is bringing in a lot of the weapons to Israel. We have many different unions who have been endorsing our campaign. We also have a petition right now that's circulating with the dock workers of Tangier Med Port 2. So if there's any unions here who want to sign on to that petition, you can find me afterwards and I can send that to you so you guys can sign on to it. There's some pictures of different mobilizations that we've taken. One that was really interesting was Maersk is trying to say that they are going green. So they said that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2040. I don't know how you can go green while facilitating a genocide that is, producing more greenhouse gas emissions from just Gaza than we've seen in the past 5 years combined. But they decided to have this really big unveiling alongside Nike about their new carbon neutral ship, and so the Palestinian Youth Movement organized a protest outside, and Maersk ended up actually leaving. They took their ship away. They had a bunch of people who were supposed to go tour the ship, and they canceled it. And they released a statement again saying, "We're not shipping any weapons. We're not affiliated with this. We don't know where they're getting their research from. These are just crazy activists." So we're working with many different groups, specifically one named ECHO in Denmark, who's going to be putting forward a resolution at the next shareholder meeting. We have different Spanish government lawsuits against Maersk. We now have multiple in the works. And then we did a submission of a report to Albanese's office, and we're going to be exploring more European Union legal routes. Divestment, Maersk is now on the BDS list. And I also want to say that Maersk is a really difficult, it was such a strategic target for us because obviously they're a huge company, and so their relationship to genocide is actually relatively small portion of their portfolio that we're able to isolate. But because they're such a large company, it's a difficult divestment target because it's not like we can go to a port and say, don't handle any Maersk cargo. That would be absolutely insane. We can't tell people that. So what we have to be is really sharp and tight on our research and know which of these ships are the ones that are actually facilitating military cargo and put pressure on those specific ships. There's something else that I wanted to say about this. Yeah, I think that it's really important, though, that we do actually bring in the angle of the settlements, because right now what we've learned from different MPs that we've met with is that the settlement angle is one of the most developed in international law. And so politically, we see Palestine as from the river to the sea. We want the liberation of our people completely, and the right of return to our homelands, no matter where they are. But nonetheless, the settlement angle is one of the most developed, and because we are able to track thousands and thousands of shipments to settlements specifically, we're going to be taking up different legal angles amongst NGOs, and I know that Belgium specifically has done a lot of work on that, and so if there's any sort of lawyers here that want to have a conversation afterwards and explore different legal routes that we could take together, I would love to talk to you about this. There's also, just to name, I'm going to pull them up so I don't butcher them, but there is 3 different Maersk ships that we have identified that are regularly on a route that goes from London to Israel that stops in Antwerp. Now, in Britain and Europe, we are unable to actually access the bill of lading for these. Like we are in the United States, we can see the bill of lading after 1 month. We can't do that here. But it's important that we start interrogating these 3 ships, and that's the Maersk Brownsville, the Maersk Izmir, Izmir, and then the Vuokski Maersk, so Vukksi Maersk. And these 3 ships are regularly doing routes that come from London and go to Israel. They also are next to different weapons manufacturers like Leonardo's, who are producing some of the wings for the F-35 jet. And so if we're using a similar research tactic as we used in the United States, it sparks questions for us about if they are actually shipping military cargo and violating international law, but specifically also Belgium law, because right now Belgium shouldn't be allowing any sort of military gear to be going through its ports here as well. We also have some information on different aircrafts and things that are separate from the campaign that I can talk to people about if they're interested, or if they have any sort of connections to different unions at the airport. But that's the Maersk Off Maersk campaign. I wanted to save some time for us at the end. If you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them, or we can meet for coffee later. And I thank you for coming and being a part of this campaign with us.